Hello, everyone. Good morning, and thank you all so much for being here. Today, we have an incredible group of local leaders who are standing together to say that we need a short-term rental registry in the state of New York. We are having a large conversation about a housing crisis, and a core component of the housing conversation is the short-term rental market. We cannot have a holistic solution without tackling every area that touches the housing conversation. And for areas across our state, which we see represented here today, short-term rentals are a big part of that conversation. Short-term rentals are incredibly important. They're part of our economic model. They're part of our tourism industry. They're how many of our small towns and communities survived through the pandemic. And yet, in many areas across the state, housing stock is being taken off the market because many homes and places that should be full-time homes have been turned into investment properties and short-term rentals. We don't have a holistic view at the state level on what that looks like. And so I'm incredibly proud to carry the bill for a first-time short-term rental registry as well as tax collection with my partner, Assemblymember Pat Fahy. We carried this bill. We'll hear from the Assemblymember and many more in a moment, but really proud of your work and your leadership. Thank you so much. We are also joined here today by Assemblymember Carrie Warner. We're joined by a number of folks that we'll hear from. But we also have Guilderland Deputy Supervisor Dan Sapis. We are here with Ryan Gregoire, the Legislative Director for New York State Association of Counties, NYSAC. We have Bob Provost, President and CEO of New York State Tourism Industry Association. Jill Delaney, President and CEO of Discover Albany. Cassandra Harrington, President and CEO of This is Cooperstown. And Emily Simmons, President and CEO of Campground Owners of New York. This bill has over 30 associations that are supportive of this movement, everywhere from the Hudson Valley to Lake Placid to Binghamton to Buffalo. Everywhere across our state is covered in the coalition that we have built around the importance of this bill. And I want to say a big thank you to everyone who is here with us today pushing for this in the budget. I would now like to turn it over to our partner in this fight, Assemblymember Pat Fahy.
Thank you, and wonderful to be joined by so many. And of course, Senator Hinchey's being very kind because, of course, she's passed the short-term rental bill. We have not in the Assembly, but we feel very encouraged about where we are in the budget. But we know there's a few more hurdles, hence the reason we are all here today to make sure we overcome those hurdles. It's no secret I have had one version of this bill or another in the Assembly for 7 years. Thanks to Senator Hinchey when she came into the Senate a few years ago, she picked up this bill and gave it all new momentum. And there's always been three pieces of this, three pieces that are so critical. The registry, which is probably the most critical, a statewide registry, partly because we don't know what we don't know. While we see estimates, while we have, there are some local registries, we do not have a firm grasp of exactly how many short-term rentals there are. And in those 7 years, we have hit even more of a housing crisis. There's many reasons on why we have run into a housing crisis, but part of that is we have seen an explosive growth in short-term rentals. So we need a sense of that. We also need to make sure we level the playing field. And that was a major objective from day one, is leveling the playing field, because we have many hotels, clearly not enough, as we heard this weekend, and we want more. We want more hotels and motels, but those hotels pay their state and local property taxes, as well as what's called the hot tax, the hotel occupancy tax. It is those taxes that help the county, and you have many counties represented here, including Albany County, including our Albany Tourism or Discover Albany. Those taxes help put together incentive packages to recruit different conventions and different tourist activities or major sports activities, as we saw this weekend with the NCAA. That takes money. It takes an incentive package. All of those who stayed at our local hotels helped to fund that because of the sales tax, because of the hotel tax, but that was not the case on short-term rentals. So we do need to level that playing field. We do need that registry. This registry is intended as a database that would also assist all the localities with us, all the localities who also have short-term rentals. And again, would help us with collecting those taxes and we think in the end give us a better sense of what is going on. With that, I think I want to turn to the mayor, right? Is that where we're? Oh, no, sorry. Let me turn it back to you because we're going to introduce Linda.
Yes.
Sorry. Okay. I don't have the run of show right. I guess it was right there in front of me. There you go.
It's all right. Everyone is incredibly important in this fight, but someone who has been a champion with us in this conversation, really elevating the importance of the short-term rental registry in the broader housing context, is none other than Assembly Housing Chair, Assemblymember Linda Rosenthal. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And Madam Mayor, you go next. If that's okay with you guys. So I represent Upper West Side, parts of Hell's Kitchen in Manhattan, and I have braved the Airbnb housing wars, short-term rental wars in New York City. What we found in New York City is that there were so many rent-stabilized and other apartments taken off the market and instead rented out to tourists that it endangered our housing stock. It put some buildings into a bit of turmoil because it turned into a revolving door. A hotel without the safeguards of a hotel, without the taxes collected by a hotel, and without the security of knowing who is in the building. I have heard from so many people, including everyone here, who really are trying hard to make the state thrive and be an attraction. And we like that. We want more tourists to come here. However, we've seen enclaves of neighborhood turn into tourist traps. You know, part of the appeal is live among the people of the community. The community has become other tourists, just like the tourists who are coming to stay there. So what we need is a comprehensive registration system, as the two sponsors of the bill have keenly noted. We need to know what is going on in all the places around the state where people are staying. And we need to make sure that the places they stay are safe. Have smoke alarms, smoke detectors, all the things that you would need in a hotel. But we also need a comprehensive taxation system so that the counties and the state can get what they need to continue to thrive. The governor put in her budget a taxation clause, but attached to no registration system. And I know that some of the short-term rental companies who prosper from these rentals don't love a registration system. But we're the legislature, and we have to look out for everybody in the communities, and a registration system and taxation system, a comprehensive system, is the way to go. And I know we're going to be very strong on this. You can't find two better champions on this legislation. We can't let New York State become even more of an unregulated tourist attraction without the safety, the security, and the taxes that come with staying in New York State. So I'll be behind them every step of the way. And I'm very hopeful that we will overcome the obstacles, mythic, created, or real. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda Rosenthal. And I should add, the bill in the Assembly would be nowhere without the leadership. And I'm very grateful she has continued to champion this bill as it's been in the Housing Committee. And I am grateful as well that the governor put the sales tax piece of this state and local sales tax piece in the bill, but that, again, the bill is very, very incomplete without this registry, without the hotel motel tax, again, to level the playing field and give us the information we need. And with that, let's turn to the Mayor of Albany, Mayor Kathy Sheehan, who knows this better than most. Thank you.
So I am truly grateful for the leadership that we have in the Senate and the Assembly on this issue. I am the president of the New York Conference of Mayors, and this is a top issue for us. And I want to explain why. First of all, as our Assembly members and senators know, state aid, direct aid to municipalities has actually decreased over the last 12 years. We have not seen an increase, and we continue to struggle. And so when we are tasked with having to figure out how to keep our community safe, how to ensure that we know where these rentals are and who the owners are, and how we can ensure that they're paying their fair share. If that isn't done at the state level, then every municipality has to take on that burden. And it's an expense for every municipality across this state. What a waste. And it would be a continued challenge for us, one of those unfunded mandates, so to speak. And so we champion the idea of having a statewide registry. It just makes sense. The second thing that I want to stress is the issue of public safety. It's not just the safety of the rentals themselves, although that is critically important. In our city, we have a residential occupancy permit. If you want to make money renting a building, an apartment in our city, you have to register it, we have to inspect it, we have to ensure that it's safe. We want to do the same for short-term rentals. It only makes sense. But the other issue is broader with respect to public safety. Many of these short-term rentals are being used for parties, for ways of people seeking to make money, charging entry fees, hiring DJs, and we will all of a sudden get a phone call that there are 150 people at a house in a residential neighborhood. Now, that makes not only the people in the neighborhood feel unsafe, the people going to that event don't know who the owner is. There's oftentimes very challenging for us to find that owner, to ensure that we're holding them accountable. And so this is an issue with respect to broader public safety as well. And so we want our communities to be able to balance welcoming people. We've welcomed thousands and thousands of people to our city these last few days. We want to be able to welcome them. We want to be able to have a market that works. Not everyone wants to stay in a hotel. There are those who are looking to use their own homes as Airbnbs, where they're owner occupied. So there are many, many machinations of this, but there are also many, many folks who do this for a living. This is a business, and it should be treated as a business. And so I am strongly, strongly urging support for this legislation. I hope that the governor signs it. Having a statewide registry will help municipalities to focus on what they do best and not have to create a hodgepodge system across the state of registries that I think will only cost us more money and be very inefficient when we can do this at the state level. So thank you all for your advocacy, and let's take this to the finish line.
Thank you, Mayor. And yes, public safety is absolutely a part of this registry so that we know and are better informed with the housing in our localities. And for more on how this impacts local counties, we'd like to hear from the Deputy Albany County Executive, Mike McLaughlin, who is here in place of the chair of the New York State Association of Counties, and that is Dan McCoy, who couldn't join us today. But Mike, there you go. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As mentioned, on behalf of County Executive Dan McCoy, thank you for having me. I've been working on this issue for a long time, long before I became Deputy County Executive, and I think, I won't repeat too much, I know a lot's been said already, but from our point of view, we need to level the playing field, not just between hotels and short-term rentals, but between the various providers of short-term rentals. Not all of these companies engage on the same level. And so by having a state registry, we know that all of them will be at the table. We certainly hope that they'll all be cooperative in making sure that the registry works as intended. But we need to make sure that they're all going to engage in a constructive conversation and really level the playing field for everybody. In addition to that, this is the natural progression of what is, I guess, not necessarily a new industry, since Assemblyman Fahy's been carrying something of this nature for 7 years, but certainly newer than the more traditional industry. And so no different than when retail sales kind of went online, and that was a shift in the economy. This is the natural progression for the rental side of things, and for that reason, we really need to get that registry, extend the taxation to these units so that it's bringing it into the modern way of regulating and tracking. So with that, I say thank you for having me, and as the mayor said, let's get this across the finish line.
Thank you. It's true. The short-term rental platforms are no longer fledgling startup businesses coming into the market, disrupting, changing the game. They did that. They are now massive international companies that are all over the globe that have changed the way many people see tourism or people engage in communities, which on the face value is great. And it's important that we continue a big part of that, give people options for how they want to visit our communities, especially in some of our smaller towns where we don't have hotels, right? We want to make sure that our small businesses and our main streets can thrive. However, these companies now have to play by the rules, and they have to make sure that they are not only paying their fair share, but that they are regulated. And the best way to do that is with a state registry. There are, as I said, many organizations that support this bill, from the Business Council to many different groups that we're incredibly lucky to have in our coalition. And I would like to introduce one of them now, and that is Mark Dorr, the president of New York State Hospitality and Tourism Association.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hospitality and Tourism Association. So we represent 1,100 members throughout the state, and 95% of those are hotels. So I'm going to say something that may be a little off, that you might say, why is this guy saying this? Because he represents all the hotels. Our organization realizes that for the tourism industry in New York State to thrive, there's a need for short-term rentals. And what the senator just said is very true. There are parts of the state where a hotel isn't viable to build because they don't have enough business in that area year-round to do that. So there are large pockets of the state that need short-term rentals. And what we have been working on for many, many years is the registration process to help the state and also the local municipalities know what's going on in their communities. And a lot of times I hear from people and say, well, it's just a person or two, and it's just a home here and it's a home there. It's not really a business, right? We hear that. It's just a little, mom and pop running their own business. But All the Rooms, which is a global provider of data on short-term rentals, give us some data from New York State that excludes New York City. So we're taking New York City out of this because they have their own law in New York City. Annually in New York State, tourism is a $10 billion industry. Short-term rentals in New York State, outside of New York City, annually in the last 12 months is a $1 billion industry in revenue alone. And the mayor said the unfunded mandates that come across on these municipalities, with a simple registration process, you can have the collection of sales and occupancy taxes, which helps to fund what is going on in those areas. And it also goes back to, sometimes people say, well, having a registration and a mandate won't help tourism. The occupancy taxes that are collected on all of those rentals go back to the destination marketing organizations within the state, which market and promote and bring more people into the state, ultimately enhancing the short-term rental business as well as the hotel business. Right now on occupancy taxes, the hotel industry is funding all of the marketing and promotion, of which those short-term rental providers are taking great advantage of, because they are being marketed to. People are coming in. Where do I stay? They might choose a short-term rental. They might choose a hotel. But the hotel industry is funding all of that marketing and promotion. So there's a need for short-term rentals. As I said, there needs to be a structure which this language provides. And the data that is out there, all the rooms, a lot of these folks have data that they collect that they give to us. And to put that together with the registration, the sales and occupancy taxes are collected and remitted through this process exactly the way a hotel does. And the one thing I really wanted to make clear today is that with the writing and the concept of the language, if you have a short-term rental today, and in 8 or 10 days maybe the state budget gets through and it's finalized, and this language is in there, guess what? The day after the state budget is finalized, that homeowner that does short-term rentals can do exactly the same thing on that day as they were doing yesterday. All they have to do is have a registration. And I hear oftentimes about, well, it's going to be another tax on the homeowner, another tax on the establishment that's doing short-term rentals. The taxes are just a pass-through as a hotel guest would be. Sales tax and occupancy tax, the homeowner's not paying those. It is a pass-through through the registration process. So in closing, what this bill does is basically says what you're doing today, you can do 3 months from now if the language is there. All you're doing is asking the guest, which comes into our great state, to put that little extra fee on top of that, which goes back to help with the unfunded mandates, as the mayor said, and helps marketing and promote our great state to bring more people into it. And ultimately, for Governor Hochul and her folks and all the legislators in the state, ultimately that means more tax revenue, more things that we can do in New York State to make it a better place to live and to stay. So thank you for being here today. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. I know, all the facts. If you're not convinced on why we need to do this bill now, today, and in the budget, I don't know what will convince you. But with that, I would like to introduce another local champion of this bill, and that is Ulster County Executive Jen Metzger.
Thank you, Senator Hinchey. I want to thank our great senator as well as Assemblymember Patricia Fahy for introducing this important legislation. If you haven't been to Ulster County, well, you should come visit. But it's an extraordinarily beautiful place within 2 miles driving distance from New York City, and we're a huge weekend destination for out-of-county visitors. This has created incredibly fertile ground for the growth of the short-term rental market. We're a rural county. We have some great hotel and motel accommodations, but we don't have nearly the number that they have downstate from us. And we've just seen an explosive growth. And I have to say, it's like the Wild West of SDRs in Ulster County. It used to be, I remember when this first started, when, and you know, neighbors of mine who were just trying to pay their taxes and have a little supplemental income would rent out a room. Now it is a real estate investment opportunity for individuals and LLCs, not necessarily from our communities, coming up and buying up houses. We face an unbelievable housing affordability crisis in Ulster County. Just to give you a snapshot sense of it, so our Department of Social Services places our residents who find themselves homeless in emergency housing. There has been over 40% increase in the number of our residents who are in need of emergency housing. And this has been mostly families, okay? So these are kids that are being placed in motels, they're in school, they're being moved around the county. It is an incredible hardship on these families. The average stay in emergency housing for families in 2021 was like 3 months, maybe 3 to 4 months. Today, it is almost 2 years because of a lack of permanent housing options. So this is a crisis. Is it caused by STRs? No, but it is definitely a major contributing factor. And we have communities that are seeing 5 to 10% of their housing stock now. They're now STRs. So it's making a huge difference. So this is where this legislation comes in. Information is power. Our estimates of STRs, they're just estimates. We have a consultant that scrapes the internet for this for data on STRs. We need the actual data. We need the actual data. First of all, it helps the communities that are regulating STRs regulate them more effectively. A number of our, I'd say about a half a dozen municipalities in Ulster County have put caps in place on the number of permits so they could try to balance the benefits with the cost, but it's really hard to enforce when you don't have the data on unregistered Airbnb, unregistered STRs and the like. So that data is really important. It's extremely important for municipalities that don't currently have any regulations on the book. As the mayor talked about, just basic health and safety protections for the community, for the people that are staying in these STRs, basic insurance requirements, all of that is important. And it is a critical step. This information is a critical step for municipalities to start considering putting the regulations in place. It enables them to get better control over their housing stock and preserve some of that housing stock for their own residents, for their own workers, for their own families. So, and lastly, I'll just say the sales tax provision of this bill is extremely important as well. We created last year, I proposed and we now have established a housing action fund in Ulster County to expand the stock of affordable housing for our residents. And this legislation would enable us to collect a few million more dollars in taxes that could go toward this fund and could go toward addressing the housing crisis in our communities. So get it passed. Let's see it as part of the budget. I'm a huge fan. Thank you both for your legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, County Executive. And it's true, we know, and a big part of the conversation on housing in the budget now is about building more housing. And we need to build more housing. We have not invested. But we don't know how much more housing we need to build if we don't know how many houses have been taken off the market for people to live in. It's a no-brainer, obvious piece of this puzzle. I'd also like now to acknowledge Assemblymember Jonathan Jacobson has joined us. Thank you for joining us. And I'd like to introduce Assemblymember Carrie Warner. Say a few words.
Thank you. I'd like to thank our sponsors for this legislation and for their steadfast commitment to this common sense change. I represent the 113th Assembly District, which includes Saratoga Springs. It is, the summer place to be in New York. And we welcome close to 1 million visitors to Saratoga over the course of a year. There's 3,300 hotel rooms. There's about 1,000 short-term rentals. And this is growing year over year. It only makes sense that we know where they are, that we know who owns them, that we provide for the same health and safety for the consumers who choose a short-term rental over a hotel room as we do for those who are in the hotel rooms. That's part of our obligation, is to keep our tourists safe so that they will enjoy their experience in Saratoga Springs. It's also true, as you've heard from the county executives and from the mayor of Albany, that we are losing important housing stock to these short-term rentals. Try to find an affordable apartment in Saratoga Springs. I dare you. Try to find an affordable apartment. They don't exist anymore. Try to find one in Saratoga County generally. They don't exist anymore. And are the short-term rentals the reason why? No, but they're certainly contributing to it. Getting our arms around where these units are, how many of them exist in our communities is just critical, and it just makes sense to do this. Now, I will also say that I represent a rural community, and certainly Washington County, which has no hotels, has more than benefited from tourists coming to Washington County for farm stays, to stay in a tree house or a yurt. short-term rentals have opened up tourism in our rural communities. But I would suggest to you that it is even more important in that setting that we understand where they are and that somebody is inspecting them. Because if you're staying in a treehouse, you really want to make sure it's safe. But if the state or the county health department doesn't know that that treehouse exists and is being rented out, they have no way to go and inspect it. They have no way to make sure that that is going to be safe for the people who rent it. So for our urban communities as well as for our rural communities, this is very common sense legislation. It's going to protect not just the fiscal interests of the communities, but it's going to make sure that we can provide for the health and safety of every visitor who comes to our communities. Thank you again for all your great work on this, and let's get this over the finish line.
Thank you, Assemblymember. I would now like to introduce Daniel Latona from For the Many.
Hello, everybody. My name is Daniel Latona. I am the political coordinator at For the Many. We're a grassroots organization in the Hudson Valley. There was actually an Airbnb presser in here earlier today. I asked them if they'd be using the room long, and they said no, short term. In all seriousness, I want to thank Senator Hinchey and Assemblymember Fahy for inviting me here and introducing this important bill. At For the Many, we believe in good cause eviction, tenant protections, and green social housing. But we also believe that there is no single fix for our complex housing crisis. Short-term rental regulation absolutely needs to be part of the equation. Since 2022, For the Many has been working on local legislation to regulate short-term rentals. We were able to get a strong version of it passed in the city of Kingston, which we believe can be a model for many cities in the state. This state-level Hinchey-Fahy bill is exactly what we need to support local governments that are trying to craft short-term rental policies that fit their communities. So I live in the city of Poughkeepsie, which, like all of New York, is experiencing a severe housing crisis. And right next door to me is an Airbnb vacation rental listed for nearly $300 a night. The host doesn't live in Poughkeepsie, and so I don't live next to neighbors. I live next to tourists. I would love to see the place next door go to a renter or a first-time home buyer, and then if that person chooses to rent out their spare bedroom on Airbnb, I'd have no problem with that. But let's make sure that everyone has a place to live first before we worry about having fancy vacation rentals for tourists. It's very important to remember that Airbnbs and Vrbos are not housing providers. They are multinational tech companies that compete with traditional hotels, which have a large unionized workforce. It's very interesting how Silicon Valley innovation always means lower standards for workers. Whenever new tech businesses emerge, our tax and regulatory frameworks need to be updated to match that, and this bill does a very good job of that. We need to have a registry, safety standards, and a comprehensive taxation system to make sure that there's revenue flowing to the state and local governments. That's just common sense. So let's get this done this month in the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. And one other comment on the urgency of this bill. Many communities have put their own registration systems in place. Many others are waiting for the state to do something so that they don't have to, thank you, so that they don't have, exactly. They're waiting for the state to do something for many reasons, not the least of which they don't want to spend their own local tax dollars or don't have the tax dollars to do it, and it should be a statewide system. So the urgency is immediate, and we have to do this now. I'd now like to finally turn it over to Assemblymember Fahy.
I just want to quickly add and reiterate so much of what we've heard today and the numbers. Again, when we started down this path many, many years ago, it was nowhere, short-term rental was nowhere near the explosive growth. In fact, in many ways, it was a New York City issue that Linda Rosenthal helped to champion many years ago. To use Mark's numbers, we guesstimate essentially it's about $1 billion industry here in New York, and it's growing. So with that, I just want to say we are pleased, again, that the governor has included one component of this in the budget. It is incomplete without the statewide registration and the hotel motel tax. And so I think you're hearing across the board that it's unacceptable without those critical components, because we need to know what we don't know right now. And with that, happy to take any questions. questions.
Member, how do you feel about taking this into the budget, given that the speaker has continually said he doesn't support policy?
Well, because we respect what the speaker is saying, but if we add in both the taxes, the leveling the playing field again, what a hotel pays is a state and local tax, their sales tax essentially, as well as the hotel motel or the hot tax. Those are taxes, that is hundreds of thousands of dollars just into Albany County. As County Executive Metzger said, it could be as much as millions in, sorry?
Just over $2 million in sales tax just for county government.
Yeah, so just over $2 million. So we do think, while it's not a direct state revenue, sorry, not, it's not a budget direct revenue into the state. It is through sales tax as well as the hotel tax. So we do think it belongs, and we think it would be a critical component of this. So it's much more than policy.
I would just say, right, we do policy tied to financials all the time
Yes.
in the budget. It's not just straight policy. And so, but in order, if you just did the financial component, it's an incomplete system. So it's all tied together and has to be done as one.
And it's no secret that sometimes a budget can carry a controversial bill. As I said, I started down this road 7 years ago, thanks to Senator Hinchey. We got all sorts of new momentum when she picked up the bill a number of years ago as well in the Senate. So we know this has been controversial, but we do think it's common sense to use Assemblywoman Warner's comments.
Controversial only to the platforms.
Only to the platforms, yes. And the state, sorry, and it is a state revenue maker, thank you, Ryan. The state would get the 4% of that sales tax, 4% going to, or 4 or more going to the localities. Thank you. That's right, of course. Anyone else? Okay.
Great.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.